Hi, my name's Keith Cooper, Northlight Images, and in the past I've done quite a few short videos about aspects of photography business and the like, and I haven't done anything recently, and somebody asked me just the other day, which one of the reasons I welcome questions, was I'm going to be doing some more professional photography. And I noticed they said more. They didn't say this was new or something else. And was wondering whether I really need to bother with contracts. Well, at its simplest, as a business, the moment you agree to do any work, you have entered into a contract of some form. Now, from my point of view, running our business, industrial, architectural photographer. I don't do weddings or stuff like that. So you do need to be a little bit more careful in terms of contracts and details if you're dealing with the public, because there may be different legislation where you are in terms of consumer protection and the like. But I'm talking in terms of dealing with commercial clients, such as photographing this building during its construction and the likes of that. Yes, you absolutely do need contracts. Doesn't need to be an overly daunting thing, because there are lots of pro formas out there. Certainly, if you have a look at some of the photography groups and organisations, you will find information on contracts. But what's the gist of what you need? You need contracts primarily for your benefit as a business. Invariably, you are working, if you're like I do, as just Karen and myself at Northlight Images, invariably if you're working you're working for a larger organisation. You need the authority that the contract gives you. Now, they are for your benefit, and that means that you should make sure that the contracts are written in a way that you don't inconvenience or produce problems for yourself. So remember, if you agree to do some work for somebody and it's in a business context, it's a verbal contract. Verbal contracts are always to be very wary of. Great, you think, well, I've known this person for ages, I've done work for them in the past, and they said, somebody phones me up and says, Keith, we've got a new building, such and that, can you pop round and do some photos? I'll say yes, I don't see any reason why not. We'll get back to you on that with a formal quote. Why a formal quote? It's because we're a proper business. That's the way we work. We have procedures for taking on work. Even if you're a relatively small business, have a procedure for dealing with stuff. Now, for us, it involves Karen will send off a quote for anything. I'm not allowed to give financial quotes on the phone to somebody who just phones up, because I have a habit of just plucking a figure out of thin air and going, oh yeah, I'll do it for that, without actually working out the details sometimes. Not always, but be wary of the fact that if it's a job you think, oh, this will be really fun, I really look forward to doing this, the temptation is maybe to lowball the offer. Remember, lowballing the offer, you may be, from your point of view, you may be giving a discount, but from the client, when you remove that and go back to your normal price, as it were, they see it as a price increase. They don't see it as a loss of discount. You may say, you view it in different ways. Putting this on paper or electronically is a way of controlling this to your benefit, if possible. Doesn't mean you're out to swindle people. It just means to make sure that you're covered against things going wrong. So, I say, if you're going to agree to something verbally, I always say that it's dependent on following up in writing, and follow things up like that. Yes, I do accept work from people saying, could you pop round and take some photos? But I always make sure that that's confirmed in writing, because once it's confirmed in writing, it reflects our terms and conditions. Now, you might think, well, what about if company sort of says, okay, they send me back an order form or something like that, but at the bottom it says subject to our terms and conditions, and you look up their terms and conditions and it's sort of payment in 6 months, or payment when we get paid for our work, if you're sort of in a subcontracting chain. Well, if you just go ahead with that, you've accepted their T's and C's. Because there's an important thing, and I'm talking English contract law here, there's an important thing, the dueling principle. he who shoots last survives. And in general, if somebody sends you, an order, your confirmation of that order, if it says this is subject to our terms and conditions, and they might be payment net 14 days or something like that, your terms and conditions supersede the ones that were given in the order. It's the last T's and C's that counts. Now, they have to be reasonable terms and conditions. You can't suddenly, in your terms and conditions, put a thing saying that if the client doesn't wear a particular hat, you're going to double your fees or something like that. It has to be reasonable for it. And that is how any arbitration of contract law, certainly under English jurisdictions, will attempt to work on a basis of reasonableness. You can't enforce unreasonable contract conditions. Even more so with consumer stuff. But I'm not going to get it, the standard I am not a lawyer bit ascribes there. But anyway, make sure you've got your terms and conditions sorted out clearly. And that can cover things like payment, ownership of rights, all kinds of stuff like that. This is why if somebody hires us to take some photographs, and I'm going to do this, the photographs, I retain copyright. You think, well, why is that? That gives me power over use of the photographs. That means the license, and the licensing doesn't need to be an onerous task, because remember that some clients, some businesses, if you say, oh, well, the photography is £1,000 and then licensing of the images we take will be another 1,000, people think, hang on, license, yeah. Be careful how you present this. There are lots of different ways of going about it, but essentially for ourselves, any image licensing is included in the quote that we put it. We don't charge it normally as a special item. I say normally because our normal licensing has a few restrictions on it, such as the client can't give away your photographs to everyone they feel like. They have to come back to you. In an example like this, if I'm taking a photograph for the architects now, or maybe the developers, I do not want the architects giving away my photographs for no return to me to all and sundry trades who are involved in this, so they can use them on their websites and they can use it to help their business. If somebody wanted that, it would be in the contract. So we always make sure that there is a restriction on it. But licensing, like saying, well, we'll license the image to you for a year, that's a bit mean. But there are circumstances where licensing can be very specific and meaningful. But in saying I'm licensing this to you for a year, how am I going to enforce that after a year? What am I going to do after a year? Mainly, it's to give you leverage and to say, you can use the image, but you can't put it into a library. Now, we've had instances in the past where a local newspaper has got one of our photographs from a client, and whilst the licensing allowed use of that image to benefit the client's business, i.e. an article about them or something like that, it did not give the newspaper rights to take that photo, dump it into their image library and use it as a stock image whenever they feel like. We've taken this up with a few newspapers in the past, and yes, it has cost them money. In fact, for licensing stuff, we use a service like Pixie, which will actually have the legal and will go after people. It's a lot more expensive for people if it goes that route. Now, if only they'd licensed it properly. But yeah, that comes as part of your contract. It's all about making it so that potential things that go wrong aren't going to cause you problems. Now, all sorts of things can always go wrong. But by paying care to your terms, conditions and your contract terms, in doing that carefully, you're trying to minimize the risk. Remember too that if a large company uses one of your images and you're hoping to get more work off them, sometimes a rather more diplomatic approach than setting the lawyers on them is worthwhile. But that depends on your business, the size of your business, the kind of image, the business that's doing doing the infringement, for example. There, so all needs to be done. But by taking care of contracts and stuff up front, that's fine. We rarely have contracts for ourselves that need to be signed and returned. We rarely work that way. It's a lot of trouble. But if you do it, make sure everything is nailed down. One example that you might like to think of if you're supplying images and licensing your images now is the client allowed to use your images for training AI systems? Is it allowed to use your system? Is it allowed to pass on your images to another company which uses your images for training? There's all kinds. This is an emerging area, and you'll find quite a lot of discussion on. But think of it. I'm certainly going to put in our T's and C's that if the images are to be used in any way for AI training, that needs a separate license term. Now, I'm not sure how I'm going to enforce this or otherwise, but it's one of those things about thinking ahead, which is the essence for it. So to the person who asked me, do I need a contract? Well, there will be one whether you like it or not, and it's best to make sure that the contract you've got is one, ideally, that you've written, potentially with legal input to its phrasing and what's in it. But yes, absolutely, you need to consider contracts for your business. There we go. Hope that's of interest. So I've got a business of photography specific playlist which has got lots of different example videos in it, relatively short videos covering topics related to the business of being a photographer, becoming a photographer, or pricing, all kinds of stuff like that. I put some links in the notes to this. Hope that's been of use. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me and just let me know. So thanks very much.